When he came face to me, I immediately succumbed to temptation. Welcome to the channel Infidelity Stories. I am Sarah, a 35-year-old woman. I've always been dedicated to my work and my marriage. I am a financial analyst at a large company, and despite the pressures of daily life, I've always found time to care for my home, my husband, and myself. I have an almost obsessive sense of organization. I like everything in its place, knowing exactly where I stand. But at the same time, I am a dreamer. I believe in true love, the kind that overcomes all adversities. Perhaps that's why I married Michael, a man I've always admired but now realize has become distant. Michael is 40 years old, a lawyer, with a brilliant career. When we first met, he was the most charming man I had ever known, with his easy smile, deep eyes, and sharp sense of humor. He knew how to captivate everyone around him. He has always been ambitious, determined, someone who doesn't accept defeat. Of course, that was one of the things that attracted me to him, but in recent months, I've noticed Michael has changed. He has become more reserved, less present, as if he is always somewhere else, even when he is right next to me. And then there's Emma, Michael's new assistant at the office. She is 28 years old, beautiful, intelligent, and seems always eager to help. I met her at one of Michael's work events, and she was incredibly kind to me. At the time, I thought she would be a good addition to his team, someone who would truly make a difference. But as time went on, I began to notice small things that I hadn't paid attention to before. Michael always spoke about her with admiration, and little by little, I realized that her name appeared in our conversations more often than I would like. In the early years of our marriage, Michael and I were inseparable. Our lives were so intertwined that it was hard to imagine one without the other. We spent our nights talking about everything, from our workdays to our dreams for the future. Michael was always a man of action, someone who made plans and saw them through with determination. He was the kind of person that, when he said he would do something, you could count on it getting done. I loved that about him, but over time, something changed. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, I started to notice that the sparkle in his eyes when he looked at me wasn't the same. Michael began spending more time at work, which didn't bother me at first. After all, he had always been ambitious and focused on his career. But soon, these extra hours became more frequent, and the conversations we used to have before bed became shorter, almost automatic. I tried to keep things the same as they had always been, but the truth was, I felt increasingly lonely in our marriage. Romantic dinners were replaced by quick meals in front of the TV, and weekends we used to spend together were now spent in silence, with him buried in his work and me trying to fill the emptiness with activities that used to bring me joy but now seemed like mere distractions. And then there was Emma. Whenever Michael talked about her, I felt a small twinge of jealousy, but I tried to push it away, telling myself it was ridiculous. After all, she was just an assistant, a co-worker. But as time passed, I began to realize that Emma's presence in Michael's life was changing something between us. I found myself wondering why he was so eager to talk about her, why he seemed so satisfied with the help she offered, why her name kept coming up in our conversations. This sense of disconnection between me and Michael kept growing until I found myself questioning not only what was happening with him but also what was happening with me. I started thinking about what I was feeling, about why I was so bothered by Emma's presence in our lives. I wanted to believe our marriage was still strong, that we could overcome anything, but a part of me already knew that things were changing, even if I didn't want to admit it to myself. I clearly remember the day I met Emma. It was a hot Friday afternoon, and Michael had invited me to a cocktail party his office was hosting. I hesitated a little because I was tired from work and our routine, but Michael insisted. He said it would be a good opportunity to meet some of the people he had been working closely with, especially his new assistant, Emma, who he often talked about. When we arrived at the event, the atmosphere was lively, full of laughter and casual conversations. Michael was soon greeted by several colleagues, and I stood by his side, smiling and greeting the people he introduced me to. That's when she appeared. Emma approached us with a bright smile, as if she were genuinely happy to see us. She was younger than I had imagined, with wavy brown hair falling softly over her shoulders, big expressive eyes, and a presence that immediately caught my attention. She seemed so confident, so at ease in that environment, that I couldn't help but feel a little out of place. "Sarah," "This is Emma, my assistant," Michael said with a sparkle in his eyes that I didn't miss. "Emma, this is my wife, Sarah." Emma extended her hand to me, and I greeted her with a smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sarah." "Michael speaks very highly of you," she said in a sweet, friendly tone. "Thank you, Emma." "Michael also speaks very highly of you," I replied, trying to sound as cordial as possible. Though something inside me was already uncomfortable, we spent some time talking, and it quickly became clear that Emma was extremely competent and dedicated to her work. She spoke passionately about the projects at the office, describing in detail how she was helping Michael organize and manage the most important cases. I was impressed by how much she seemed to be on top of everything. Like she was more than just an assistant, she was a true professional partner to him. However, as the night wore on, I started to notice small gestures, exchanged glances between them that bothered me. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection between them that went beyond what I considered normal between a boss and his assistant. When the night ended and we were heading home, Michael seemed in a good mood, commenting on how successful the event had been and how happy he was that I had met Emma. I smiled and agreed, but inside, that uncomfortable feeling kept growing, a feeling I couldn't ignore. After that first meeting at the cocktail party, I started seeing Emma more often. At first, it was always at work events or meetings I attended with Michael, but over time, our interactions became more frequent and, curiously, more personal. Emma seemed to have a knack for showing up at moments when I needed someone to talk to most, as if she knew exactly when I was feeling lonely or lost. One afternoon, Michael was once again swamped with work and couldn't join me for lunch as we had planned. Without thinking much about it, I texted Emma, who quickly accepted the invitation to have lunch together. Sitting in a quiet restaurant, we started chatting about trivial things, but soon the conversation took a more intimate turn. "How do you keep up with Michael's pace?" I asked, half joking but with genuine curiosity behind the question. "He seems like he never stops." Emma laughed, a laugh that was both soft and warm. "He really is tireless, but I've adapted. It was a little hard at first, but now I understand how he operates. And honestly, I like the fast pace." As she spoke, I noticed something different in our conversation. It wasn't just a superficial exchange of words, there was a growing connection, something that went beyond simple friendship or a work relationship. Emma seemed to truly understand the pressures and challenges Michael and I were facing, but at the same time, she looked at me in a way I couldn't quite define. As the days passed, that feeling only intensified. Emma and I started meeting outside of work environments, for lunches, coffees, and even shopping trips. And with each meeting, I felt that something new was growing between us. She was easy to talk to, always ready to listen, but there was also an intensity in our conversations that I couldn't ignore. I felt that Emma saw parts of me that Michael had forgotten or simply neglected. One afternoon, after another one of those deep conversations, Emma invited me to have coffee at her apartment. The idea of entering such a personal space made me nervous, but also curious. I wanted to get to know her better, to understand what this energy was between us. Emma's apartment was just as I imagined, cozy, full of personality, with a touch of sophistication. She made me a coffee, and we sat on the couch, talking about life, our dreams, and even our deepest fears. At one point, I felt that our conversations were starting to touch on something more profound, more personal. "Sarah, sometimes I feel like you carry a lot of weight on your shoulders," Emma said, looking directly into my eyes. "Have you ever thought about letting yourself relax a little, letting someone take care of you for once?" Those words resonated within me in a way I didn't expect. It was like she had put into words exactly what I was feeling but could never express. I felt seen, understood, and in that moment, something inside me gave way. I looked at Emma, and for a brief instant, everything seemed to stop. The sound of the coffee dripping in the kitchen, the distant noise of the city. Everything disappeared, leaving only the two of us sitting there in a moment that seemed destined to be more than just friendship. As we sat on the couch, something in Emma's gaze changed. It was as if all the lightness we had shared turned into a palpable tension, something on the verge of being said but still trapped in the subtext of our conversations. My heart started beating faster, a mixture of fear and excitement washing over me. "Sarah," Emma began, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "I know this might sound strange, but I feel like there's something between us that goes beyond friendship." My hands began to sweat lightly as I processed her words. The truth was, I had felt it too. Ever since we started getting closer, there had been a connection I couldn't explain, something that made my heart race when she was around. But admitting it out loud felt like taking a huge step, one I wasn't ready to take. Emma, perhaps sensing my nervousness, continued, "I don't want to pressure you, but I can't pretend I don't feel what I'm feeling. You're important to me, Sarah, in a way that goes beyond anything I've ever experienced." Those words broke something inside of me. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't try to hide the vulnerability I was feeling. I feel it too, Emma, but I don't know what to do with these feelings. Everything is so confusing. I'm married, but at the same time, I feel like I'm losing myself. Emma reached out and touched my hand, a simple gesture, but one that carried an intensity one hadn't expected. That touch was like a spark, igniting something inside me that had been dormant for a long time. Without thinking, I leaned forward, bringing my face closer to hers, feeling Emma's breath mingle with mine. For a moment, everything went silent, the world around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us, so close to each other. I knew that crossing this line would change everything, but in that instant, the only thing that mattered was what I felt, and then it happened. Our lips touched, softly at first, almost as a question. I felt Emma's warmth, the softness of her lips, and it was as if all the doubts I had disappeared in that moment. The kiss deepened, and with it came a wave of emotions I didn't know I was capable of feeling. It was as if something inside me had finally woken up when we pulled apart. I sat there, looking at her, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Emma's gaze was soft, but there was a firmness there, as if she knew exactly what she wanted and was willing to fight for it. "Sarah, I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, in any way you need," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. My emotions were in turmoil. On one hand, there was the weight of betrayal, the guilt for feeling something for someone other than Michael. But on the other hand, there was a sense of freedom, of being seen and desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what the future held for us, but in that moment, with Emma by my side, I felt like I was finding something I had lost a long time ago, myself. After that first kiss, something changed between me and Emma. It wasn't just physical attraction, although that was present in every moment we spent together. It was something deeper, a connection that seemed to intensify with each passing day. We started meeting more often, always with the excuse that we were just spending time as friends, but we both knew there was much more happening. Our lunches became more frequent, and each encounter was a mix of excitement and fear. Whenever we were together, the world seemed to fade away. It was as if time stopped, and nothing else mattered. Emma had a way of making me feel alive, desired, something I hadn't felt in a long time. With every touch, every glance, my heart beat faster, and the desire to be with her grew stronger. One afternoon, after yet another meeting where the tension was palpable, Emma invited me back to her apartment again. This time, there was no hesitation. I knew exactly what I was doing, knew I was crossing a line that, once crossed, there would be no turning back. But I didn't care. The need to be near her, to feel her touch, was stronger than any doubt or guilt. When we arrived at the apartment, the atmosphere between us was charged with anticipation. Neither of us said a word as we entered, but the silence said everything. Emma moved closer to me, and without thinking, we kissed again, this time with an intensity one didn't know I was capable of feeling. That kiss was the beginning of something that quickly turned into an afternoon of passion and surrender. Spending the night with Emma was different from anything I had ever experienced. There was a softness, a tenderness I didn't know existed. She made me feel safe, loved, as if all the worries and problems of the world didn't exist in that moment. When our bodies came together, it was as if all doubts and fears dissolved, leaving only the pleasure and connection we shared. After that night, everything changed. The relationship between us became something I could no longer ignore. The desire to be with Emma grew stronger each day, and I found myself making excuses to see her, even knowing I was risking everything. I started coming home later, avoiding long conversations with Michael, because every time we talked, I felt guilty, as if he could sense what was happening. But at the same time, I couldn't stop. Emma was like a drug I had become addicted to. I craved every moment with her, every touch, every word. I knew I was playing with fire, but the fire that burned between us was irresistible. With each meeting, each stolen kiss, the bond between us grew stronger, and the thought of being without her became unbearable. I was living a double life. By day, I was the dedicated wife, but by night, I transformed into someone I barely recognized. But no matter how much the guilt consumed me, the passion I felt for Emma was stronger. As our relationship intensified, I started wondering if it was possible to continue living this way, or if I would eventually be forced to choose between what I had and what I truly wanted. While driving home after another afternoon with Emma, a thought began to form in my mind, an idea I had been trying to avoid for some time. It was almost ironic, painfully ironic. For months, I had suspected that Michael was cheating on me with Emma. Every little detail, every change in his behavior, seemed to point to it. I was convinced that something was happening between them, that he was drifting away from me because of her. And now, here I was, in the same situation. The woman I thought was stealing my husband from me is the same woman who now shares my bed, my secrets, and, in a way, my heart. The irony of it didn't escape me, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the thought of it. I had spent so much time worrying, suspecting, looking for signs of a betrayal that may never have existed, and in the end, I became the one betraying. I, who always thought of myself as a loyal and devoted wife, now found myself lying, hiding, living a double life. The guilt was almost unbearable, but at the same time, I couldn't resist the attraction I felt for Emma. Every time I tried to rationalize, to think about the consequences, the desire and connection with her overwhelmed everything else. As I drove, I reflected on everything that had happened between me and Michael over the past few months. Had I overreacted? Was all that distance, all those changes in his behavior, just the result of work stress, as he had always said? And had Emma never been more than just a competent assistant to him? Had I projected my own fears and insecurities, turning them into a reality that didn't exist? But at the same time, there was something deeper. I couldn't deny that even before Emma entered our lives, there was a growing distance between me and Michael. Something had changed, something that perhaps was inevitable, but that I was afraid to admit. Maybe I was looking for an excuse, a reason to justify what I was doing, to ease the guilt I felt for betraying the man I married. The truth was that regardless of whether Michael had cheated on me or not, I was no longer the same person. The woman I was when I got married had changed, and Emma had become a fundamental part of that change. Maybe I was trying to fill a void that Michael could no longer fill. Or maybe I was simply following my heart, even if it led me down a dark and complicated path. And so, as I drove home, I knew there were no easy answers. What I was doing was wrong, and the weight of that guilt was always present. But at the same time, I couldn't imagine my life without Emma. I was trapped in a cycle of desire and guilt, and with each passing day, it became harder to imagine a way out that wouldn't cause pain to everyone involved. After days of reflection, the guilt and confusion continued to torment me. I knew I needed to talk to Emma, to put into words the feelings and dilemmas that were consuming me. I decided it would be best to meet her again in an environment where we could talk openly, without rush or interruptions. We met at a discreet cafe, far from the city center, where no one knew us. When I arrived, Emma was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, looking out the window. There was a certain calmness in her posture, but also a tension that I knew wasn't only within me. When she saw me, she smiled softly, but her eyes showed that she knew this wouldn't be an easy conversation. After a brief greeting, I sat across from her, and for a moment, we sat in silence. I didn't know exactly where to start, but as always, Emma seemed to understand what was going through my mind. "Sarah, I know you're going through a whirlwind of emotions," she began, her voice calm and full of understanding. "I feel it too. I know what happened between us is complicated, and I want you to know that I'm here for whatever you need. No pressure." That last part, "no pressure," echoed in my mind. It was exactly what I needed to hear, but at the same time, I knew I could no longer avoid the issue that was surrounding us. "Emma," I began, taking a deep breath, "I can't stop thinking about us, about what happened, about what's happening. I'm torn between what I feel for you and the guilt I have for betraying Michael. But at the same time, the idea of staying away from you, I just can't." She looked at me intently, her eyes fixed on mine, and I could see that she was reflecting on what I had said. Emma reached across the table, taking my hand, and her touch brought me a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in days. "Sarah, I feel the same way. I know it's difficult. I know we're in a complicated situation, but the truth is, I don't want to let go of what we have. I want to be with you, even if it means keeping this a secret for now." Her words, so direct and sincere, touched me deeply. It was as if Emma had put into words what I had been trying to avoid admitting to myself. I wanted to continue with her, even knowing that it meant betraying Michael. Even knowing we were walking on dangerous ground. "Do you really think we can do this?" I asked, almost as if I was seeking permission to continue to have an affair, to live this double life. Emma squeezed my hand lightly, her gaze serious but also full of affection. "It won't be easy, and there will be risks. But if this is what you want, if this is what we both want, we can find a way to make it work. We can be discreet, careful. We just need to decide if this is really what we want." There was a moment of silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a moment of decision, of acceptance of what we were about to do. I knew that by agreeing, I was committing to something that could change everything, but the alternative, walking away from Emma, was something I simply couldn't accept. "I want this, Emma. I want to be with you, even if it's in secret," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders as I admitted what I truly desired. Emma smiled, a smile that was both sad and full of hope. "Then we'll make it work, Sarah." Together, and so, in that discreet cafe, we made our pact. We knew we were embarking on something complicated, risky, but the connection between us was too strong to ignore. We decided we would have an affair, hidden, a secret only we would share, something that would allow us to be together, even in the shadows. With the pact sealed in that cafe, our lives took an unexpected turn. From that moment on, Emma and I became experts at keeping our relationship a secret. Our interactions were always discreet, hidden in carefully planned moments. When we met, it was as if the world around us ceased to exist. There was no guilt, no fear, there was only the two of us and the connection that bound us. Michael, on the other hand, seemed more involved with work than ever, which made things easier for me. He suspected nothing, and in a way, our marriage even improved. I felt lighter, less pressured, and that reflected in the way I interacted with him. The conversations that were once difficult now flowed more easily. There was a new tranquility in our home, a peace that seemed to settle in with time. The relationship between Emma and me, however, flourished in secret. We had our moments together, stolen from the day-to-day, and each one was special, whether it was a long lunch escape, an afternoon at her apartment, or even a brief meeting in an. At the same time, I was the passionate, free woman with Emma. In the end, I found a balance I never imagined possible. I was happy with Michael, and he with me. Our life together continued to be stable, full of good moments and a shared understanding that still existed. And with Emma, I found another form of love, one that complemented and completed what I had at home. It wasn't a conventional life, but it was my life, and it brought me a happiness that I otherwise wouldn't have known, and so, the betrayal was never discovered. I continued to divide my heart between two people who, in different ways, completed me. Michael remained happy, unaware of what was happening behind the scenes, and Emma and I continued to love each other, finding joy in the moments we could share. In the end, we were all happy, living lives that, while imperfect, were filled with love and understanding. And perhaps, in a way, that was the secret to our happiness, accepting what life had given us and finding peace in what we were able to build together, even if it meant living in secret. Before you leave, remember to subscribe to the channel by activating the Tinkerbell to receive notification. Every time. Isolated spot. Each moment we shared was full of passion and mutual understanding. I discovered parts of myself I didn't know, desires and feelings that Emma awakened in me, making me feel alive in a way I had never experienced before. As the months passed, I was surprised to find that the guilt that had once consumed me began to fade. I had accepted my new reality, a life divided between my marriage to Michael and my love for Emma. And curiously, this duality worked. Michael remained happy, satisfied with the life we had built together. He seemed more relaxed, perhaps because I, without the pressure I once felt, was also more at ease and present. Emma, in turn, was my accomplice, my confidant, my lover. She understood the difficulties and risks we faced, but there was never any pressure, no demand for more than what we could have. What we shared was enough, it was perfect in its own way. Our secret kept us connected, and perhaps that's why everything worked so well. Life went on, weeks turned into months, and months into years. No one ever suspected anything. We kept our lives separate enough to avoid suspicion, but close enough to nurture the love between us. I continued to be the dedicated, present wife to Michael, while